Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Creators Hour. I'm your host, Mike Corrado, and we've got a very special series called On Assignment, where we have photographers that have shot with the new Z6 II and the new Z7 II and the next generation of Z, telling you how they shot the cameras and what their experiences were. Real-world experiences from real-world photographers. And with us today, we have Nikon Ambassador Jide Alakija. Jide, how are you doing?
Very well, Mike. How are you doing?
Doing great. It's good to see you.
Awesome. Always great to see you too.
I mean, we talk a little bit through Zoom now. I haven't seen you physically at a trade show because we haven't gone to any, it is great to have you here. And thank you ahead of time for sharing your insights on your experiences shooting the Z7 II. Those of you tuning in, though, we have texts available online right now. So look at the chat box below. If you have any questions about the Z7 II or the Z6 II, pop them in the chat box and our technicians will answer you as quickly as we possibly can and efficiently. So, Jide,
Mike,
take a little bit of time, and anybody out there that may not know you or the type of photography you shoot, give us a little bit of background so we can catch them up to speed, and then we're going to start to roll into the assignment. I want to talk about your creative, your thoughts, how you think about what you're going to do, where you're going to go, any concepts that are involved. We're going to talk about the camera. We're going to talk about the Z7 and image quality. We want to talk about ISO, just little things like double card slots, the handling, form function, and definitely the Nikon lenses that you use, the Z Nikons, for your assignment. But let everybody know who you are, where you're from, why you're into photography.
Yeah. Oh, nice. Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Jide Alakija. I am a photographer who's based in Brooklyn, New York. My main focus in photography sort of spans along two lines. Sort of commercially, I do a lot of wedding and portrait photography, and then editorially, I do a lot of portraiture as well, but mainly street photography. I've been a photographer for the last 16 years professionally, and have kind of been doing a lot of photography along those genres. Yeah, this camera has definitely come in and met a very big need, particularly in my street photography, and I'm definitely going to talk a lot about that. Especially with the works that we're going to talk about.
Very cool. And, you know, we've spoken, again, we know each other, and I think everybody knows that we know each other. We've worked together for several years now. You started on our trade show circuit talking, and again, the only one that ever did a group shot of like 100 people on our stage right after they were done talking. What a fan base you have. I'm going to take a step back. I know it's Alakija, and I'm so proud of the fact that I know it's Alakija. And I said Alakija like everybody else. Now I feel like everybody else, but it is Alakija. So
thank you. I appreciate that, man. It's both the same. It is both exactly the same. But anyway.
Good. Well, as long as you're with us and as long as you're sharing your images, and people, trust me, I've seen the images Jide sent in for his assignment, and they're phenomenal. We're going to talk about all those. But talk a little bit, we were just talking about DSLR, your use of DSLR, and your transition into mirrorless. What's that experience like?
I think one of the things that I really love so far with the whole Z range is the fact that whilst the internals are very different, the externals in terms of form factor and some of the the menu options are pretty much the same. It's a very, very easy transition from using the D750, which I've used quite lovingly for the last sort of 5-6 years, and then making that switch to the Z range has been quite seamless actually. If anything, it's quite exciting because obviously now it's taking a lot of the thinking away from you for you. I mean, it's a very, very sort of easy sort of shift. So I think anyone who, like myself, I'm very much a bit of a dinosaur, which is why it's taken me a bit of time to sort of make that transition. Anyone who's actually being scared of sort of going from a DSLR to a mirrorless system, it's really, really not going to have an issue with this particular system.
That's funny. You mentioned you're a dinosaur. I don't know what category that puts me in. If you're a dinosaur, I must be like something well beyond that. But
I have very good dyes, black dyes for beards, by the way, if you want to try it.
Very nice. Listen, if I had your smile and your handsomeness, I'd be, where you are right now. This is amazing too. So you've been working with a Z7. Talk a little bit about, the first time I know Alfredo Ibar, one of our people in marketing, came to work with you. Certainly all of the factors of secrecy and, being out in the streets and whatnot. But When he puts this Z7 II in your hands, what's your first impressions?
First thing was, he didn't actually tell me it was a Z7 II because everything was all blacked off and blacked out. It was not until when we looked at the files and downloaded the cards that we knew what it was. I knew it was a completely different camera instantly because the form factor is pretty much the same as the first version, except for the fact that when you open the card slots, you're like, oh my God, there are 2 card slots in here. And that already kind of made me very interested. I couldn't tell what camera it was because obviously if it's not written, if it's all blacked out, you can't tell. But I mean, one of the great things about when you're walking on the streets with a small camera that gives you a very professional output is the size. When you're walking on the streets, you don't want to intimidate anyone. You don't want to look like a paparazzi. You don't want to look like a big pro. The camera is small enough to give anyone the impression that you're not a professional photographer, but it gives the output of a very, very professional series camera. And it's one of the greatest things that I love so much about the actual camera itself.
Mm-hmm. And when, for people out there that want to do what you do and the type of street photography you do, where does your mind go in creating the assignment? So you get the camera for the first time. Talk a little bit about the prep to getting where you're getting before we jump into the pictures. And I think once people start to see what you're going to explain now, it all starts to come together. The puzzle pieces come together. So how do you kind of put all this together in a shoot like this? And how many days did you shoot?
Right. Okay, so I'll go backwards. I shot over 2 days. In terms of preparing, I think one of the first things that I'm looking for is creating some sort of impact in my images. And that really comes based around just going to a place that has very interesting things. So there is a lot of research as far as trying to find an idea or find something interesting that will definitely catch your attention. Because we're playing around with a new camera, I want to go into a place that's definitely going to give me a lot of really interesting variety. Especially when you're doing a lot of street photography, a lot of the times you go to the same places all the time. And you kind of have to think to yourself, where would I find the most interesting characters that would give me the most impactful photographs and give me the most impactful ideas, things that people don't normally see. And a lot of that goes really down to, a lot of research. And you also think about it, where would I feel the safest as well? Because I want to try a lot of new things because I'm using a new camera. And also, you've also got to consider things like the elements, like the weather. Is it going to rain today? Is it going to be sunny? How's that going to impact my images and all whatnot? So in terms of working with this system, and also considering the fact that I didn't even know, like you say, this was a new system that I was using. I've never used it before. I got to give myself enough leeway to experiment. So therefore, I'm not going to go to, say, a demonstration or something like that because there are just so many things happening there. It's probably not the safest place. And moments don't come in as regularly as they would, say, on the beach or on the basketball court or XYZ. So those are kind of the things that I sort of do whenever I'm preparing for a shoot like the one we did today, for instance.
Great, and thank you for sharing with that. And then one last thing before we get to pictures. Which is better? Which is correct? Z7 or Z7 II? Z7 II or Z7 II?
Oh my goodness. Do you know what?
It's both right. So anyone out there that's debating, he's saying Z, I'm saying Z. It's all the same thing.
It is all the same, but I'm actually going to put some little bit of trivia. Okay, so obviously I grew up in England and we speak English there, but more people speak American English than the Queen's English around the world. So technically, I would almost say the Z is kind of better these days. If you go around the world, everyone says Z these days. Thanks to you guys.
Anyone out there, you can call it Z, you can call it Z. We're good with that either way. So
exactly.
Let's just jump right to these pictures because these are pretty outstanding. And when you sent this stuff in, I was just so blown away. And we just look at one after the next after the next. And as we go through this, again, I want you to think about image quality. I want to talk about the lens that you used. One of the other things that was so cool about your shoot is you were one of the first people to shoot with the new Z Nikkor 14-24. I want to talk about that, the 2.8. You
Right.
also had a really cool walk around lens in a 24 to 200. So both Z Nikkors. And we'll definitely, I want you to cite your focal lengths, talk about your exposure, what you do. So it's a little bit of education, a little bit about the camera, and certainly things about the camera that you notice. I definitely want to jump into handling more, but autofocus and performance on that. This is why we're doing this. So you need to take it away. So talk about this first picture. Where are you? Again, beautiful moment, great action, but I expect that from you. Take it
Oh,
away.
man. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Okay, so Coney Island is one of the places as a street photographer I've always wanted to create some really, really amazing work. Every so often I would visit when I make some time because you have a lot of interesting characters over there. And I decided to spend at least half a day over there with the camera and the two lenses to try different things. So whenever I'm shooting on the streets, I shoot with mainly just two lenses, which is the 28 and the 35 prime. And that's just as standard. Now, being gifted a 14 to 24 and a 24 to 200 that are actually quite small lenses at the same time on the street just kind of takes this to another level. So I decided to go onto the beach to try and find a scene that will allow me sort of express that focal length as well. And also kind of do something slightly beyond what I would normally do. And then you have on the beach people who are, you know, doing all sorts of things, expressing themselves in different ways. And I thought it would be interesting to sort of try some features on the camera. This time, like here, you have a lot of movement. I would normally lay on the floor to try and capture something like this, because obviously with the Z7, you have the IAF, the sort of really automatic autofocus system. You could just literally just flip the screen, tap on the subject you want, and let the subject do its thing. And the camera is clever enough to sort of follow the subject around, which was like so phenomenal. It just gives you a different level of stealth. A lot of street photographers don't want to make themselves very obvious when they're shooting. Laying on the floor just to get the composition the way you want to kind of makes yourself extremely obvious, makes it really, really obvious. You can just kind of squat, look down into the frame or into the panel and sort of catch your composition. And this is generally what we're trying to sort of do over here. And the fact that you get it instantly with such a quick shutter as well is something that's pretty phenomenal. So there's so many great things to sort of catch, to see here. Dynamic range is another one of them. As you can see, it's a very bright day. On most systems, you probably will have a very sort of blown out sky. You have a lot of very good tones in here. It's one of the things that really, really caught me. And then good color, rich color is another thing that we're trying to capture too. So just even the lady over there, just doing that jump with the loop, the swan loop, the color in that was also quite rich. So there's so many things that I was looking for when I caught this scene. And then also there's the artistic element to it as well, trying to make something that looks quite pleasing too.
That's awesome too. And that's, again, you know, you bring up a great point, the flip screen, you know, having touch capability for AF and firing and all sorts of controls, all the menus and dials. I've always loved that. And, you know, when Jide brings up IAF, now what's great about the Z6 II, Z7 II is it's got IAF not only in still, but in video. And it also works in the wide area box. So, you know, there's some really great improvements to the AF. And, you know, you speak to the confidence you need in a system, you know, to make sure that focus is working in autofocus. I mean, you kind of mentioned it, but just touch upon that a little bit more.
Well, I guess in terms of in terms of sort of being able to sort of use a focusing system, I think you want something that's very reliable, something that will produce very good results. I was, to be honest, completely blown away by the fact that, I mean, Alfredo just kind of showed me, you know, he set up the camera instantly and said, hey, you can do this, you can do that. These are the different AF systems there were, and there are quite a few of them. And I said, oh, I really like this one where you just tap this and, you know, just let the thing do its thing. And I think for me, that in itself is one of the easiest things of using a camera of this nature. The camera doing the work for you. Traditionally, I'm one of those people who's kind of holding onto something and then just kind of moving things around and composing to catch it. And I found myself doing a lot of that. But this time you can just kind of fix your composition and let the subject tap on the subject. It will catch the subject, find the eyes of the subject, and sort of follow the subject around and do the things that you want it to do. So, yeah, I mean, as far as the AF system is concerned, it's pretty superior. And I would obviously recommend that to anyone.
So I have another fact that was kind of tossed my way. Is it true that Alfredo said that you worked him so hard that you guys did 60,000 steps a day?
Alfredo's a fit guy. I'm sure he enjoyed it.
He said it was like running 3 marathons working with you.
We did
I
a
love
lot
the color. I'm sure you did. I guess the point of that is, if you're dealing with street photography, it is a lot of walking, and that's great because get a little bit of exercise in. This one struck me as just such an amazing image. Again, talk about your thought process as you're in these moments. And again, if you remember the lens and some of the settings, I would assume you're shooting raw file format.
Yes. Yes.
Mm-hmm. I know some of these questions may seem obvious to people, but just so everybody understands your approach to this. But one of the things I love about the double card slot now is I'll just run RAWs on one slot and JPEGs on another. And if I'm doing something big, like a big concert, I'll just use it as an overflow. There's so many different ways to use it. But talk about this moment, this picture, how you walk into it. Again, we got the element of the flamingo in the background. I love the blow-up flamingo. And now even better, the striped tube here for the pool. So what's happening here?
The scene itself just really catches your eye. I mean, the fact that you have a character who's carrying or doing some squats with I call them the donuts, the floating donuts. And just the way, there's a certain mystery to it. The fact that, you have 2 different characters carrying very similar things, and just doing very, very sort of obscure things is definitely something that will catch your eye in a beach that's very, very obscure as well. And that's what really is speaking to me at this point. The colors as well really, really sort of jump out at me. They're both very similar colors. You've got pink in the background, pink in the foreground, and also the color tones. I like the fact that they're quite dark, almost in a silhouette form. They almost look like silhouettes, but you can also see some tones as well. Again, that's credit to the camera being able to capture those things. And I think when you're walking in these scenes, you want to be, again, just by flipping the screen, looking down to see when things are going to sort of happen. I remember when I actually started this scene, I initially had the guy walking in the foreground in the eye of the donut. And then this one was one that actually worked out the best for me. But again, I can't remember how many frames I can sort of capture in a buffer, because that was another thing that I did. I did a lot of sort of burst shots because, again, it's a mirrorless camera and you're shooting in silent mode. You can't hear anything when these things are happening. So sometimes you have to kind of go and review and say, did I actually catch that? And because the camera is doing its thing. And that's one of the things that I loved about the camera, is the fact that you can get so close to a subject. A lot of street photography is shooting, again, in stealth. So you don't want to make too much noise to affect the scene. And sort of hitting the shutter and it being so silent, well, it doesn't even actually make any noise at all, is actually a great thing. So I'm able to get so close to the subjects without them being able to hear anything at all.
Yeah, it's funny because you can't, and I've gotten so used to just trying to find that little nuance of just a little movement of the aperture, and you feel that tiny little bit of kind of, and then you kind of have that sense. But again, what I love about this is, as you say, in the way of composition, if you stand up for this shot, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Right? To get down lower, it works. You stand up, all of a sudden you got the horizon cutting through the donut or whatever you called that before. And, so that's, to me, again, I didn't even think about that when we first got together, but that's got to be a great feature for street photography. I don't do a lot of street photography, so I'm learning here as well.
Brilliant.
Simplicity of this, you just got to love. What's going on here? Where are you? If you can also cite maybe the locations, unless it's a secret place you don't want anybody to go.
Um,
But this is very, very cool. Talk about your concept here. And we're talking 1424 here?
Yeah, this was shot at 24. No, I think this was still on the 24 to 200. On this day, I think I mainly used the 24 to 200 for most of the pictures. This is actually in a car parking lot downtown, just by Canal Street. You have a lot of them over there. I'm very fascinated by arrows. Whenever I see arrows, I have them sort of pointing to things or kind of giving you ideas, or just kind of leading the mind, to different areas. I did like the way that light was sort of cast between the buildings, sort of around sunset. So we came to this area because I was looking to play around with some very nice harsh shadows. And there's this boarder who was just sort of, doing some layups and flips in this area. And this particular shot had him sort of going to the arrow, creating that sort of very, that gesture of wings. And I just thought it was quite an interesting, scene where you have a certain sense of freedom and some whimsical feeling of a guy just kind of being in some sort of space, and the arrow just kind of leading to some area, and again, just kind of walking around with a camera, just pointing to something, looking down. Again, you're looking down all the time, and people just can't really see what you're doing. I can keep talking about the way you're, how you're able to shoot these things with this camera all day. Is one of the bonuses. Again, really good light. Sometimes it's very hard to see these things because you think, is it in black and white or is it in color? There's a certain warm tone to it, and I think that's the mystery of this image.
Yeah, it definitely brings a monochromatic look and for sure that feel. And again, you mentioned before dynamic range, when you're dealing with that beach scene. If you look into the corners of this frame, you look from the darks to the lights, there's a lot of dynamic range. And the thing that nobody can ever pick up off a website unless you experience it as you did. And I've been shooting Z6 II and Z7 II for about a month or two now myself. The one thing I noticed was definitely the pop in dynamic range, better dynamic range in both the Z7 and the Z6 II and Z7 II. And so talk a little bit about that and how important it is, maybe not just for this scene, but for the other things that you do. What did you think of the image quality overall?
I'm definitely, this is I think about 45 megapixel image. I mean, there's a lot of detail. Oh my goodness, so much detail in the image, which is obviously a credit to how good the lenses were as well. Coming back onto that whole point of dynamic range, I remember when I took this image, when I saw it in my mind's eye, I thought, oh, if I take this shot, those shadows are going to turn completely black. When I put it onto the screen, then I saw all that detail, even in the shadows. And I think one of the greatest things as well, Mike, is if you push the files, like you push the raw files, you pick up all that detail with very little noise as well. This has obviously been one of the features of Nikon anyway, to have such great dynamic range, but this is taking it to the next level, sort of shooting at with such huge dynamic range. I think in one of the shots that I actually took, I remember I'd had this shot already taken because I'd already metered for the light in this one. I think I went somewhere else and took another shot and forgot to change my settings because I just, lifted the camera and just took a shot. But then being able to sort of shift it in post is one of the great things as well, because there's such huge, dynamic range in that. So there's a lot to play with, a lot you can sort of do. It's like you can go to any scene, take any short photo you want, and then come back and sort of tweak it to how you want it to be in post. I remember when I was processing this particular one, I had a few dilemmas as to whether I wanted to make those shadows even darker or wanted to make them even brighter. And to have that option is always great. There's nothing worse than sort of taking a shot and now having to sort of think to yourself, okay, do I want to take it with a lower exposure, or do I want to increase the exposure, and sort of, working in that. And once the moment is gone, it's gone. But having that dynamic range to kind of give you the option to sort of make that decision afterwards is obviously a really, really good thing.
Beautiful. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're tuning in, we have Jide Alakija. I got Alakija.
Yes.
And if you have any questions, we're running out of time, to drop them in the chat box below, and our technical people will be there to answer them for you. Z6 II, Z7 II. We're focusing on the Z7 II this segment. And thank you, Jide. Just some really amazing conversation here, because I'm learning about street photography as we're going. So I hope you guys out there are too. A little bit of basketball coming up here. We got several basketball shots. Talk about where you are and what you're thinking, what you're doing. This definitely looks pretty wide.
Yes. So this was shot with the 14 to 24 f2.8 lens. So Alfredo handed this lens to me and said, "Hey, we have this. You didn't use it yesterday. Do you want to play around with it today?" I was like, "Yeah, definitely. Let's see." I don't normally shoot at that wide. Like I said, I normally shoot 28, but I thought, okay, I'll try something different. We're in the basketball court here in Pier 2 in Brooklyn. There's some really nice courts there where people are sort of playing around. I was hoping we would have a nice sort of, heavy sunlit day, but, it didn't actually happen like the previous day. But we're still able to sort of play around with something a bit different, which is focal length. And I thought, okay, do you know what? I'm going to try and shoot with a really wide focal length on this one and try and play around with some of the distortion. Got onto the courts. And the first thing that struck me was, obviously, because it's so wide, you have a lot in. But this is a basketball scene. There is a lot of movement. So this shot was shot at 1,250 over a second, ISO 800, 5.6. It was very, very interesting, sort of having this, this sort of new way of shooting with such a wide focal length. It was very different, but it was again, like I said, I was just kind of on my knees, just getting close to this subject, getting shot, not just great images, but really sharp images. And, at the same time, being able to see everything in that focal length. And this is essentially what I'm trying to do here, just really kind of show these lines, show these shapes, and at the same time, getting the focal length the way I want. I remember I tapped on the ball here to try and get the ball in focus, and then just kind of shot a burst to try and frame the person in the background. I shoot at very, very high f-stop or very small apertures because I want to get as much in focus as possible. And instantly, this was one of one of the best ones that I caught at the time, obviously. And yeah, I was very, very, very impressed with this. On a typical day, I would go to a scene like this and most of the times not come out with anything that is quite useful. A lot of street photography is like that. You go to different scenes, try different things. You could be there for like hours, and just one little shift may not actually be working for you because you're not able to catch things quick enough. You're not able to make compositions quick enough. And so having a system that actually helps you take some of that burden makes it a lot easier. As I said, just using the focus, the sort of IAF is just taking a lot of work away from you. So now all you're just doing is focusing on borders and focusing on other things because the camera is following your subject around. You don't have to sort of keep focusing and, holding on to and focus points and things like that, which is absolutely great. So yeah, that's what this is about. I wanted to sort of depict a certain sense of culture. I wanted to capture some of the culture that happens in the urban scenes here in New York. And being in the basketball courts is one of the things. You have a lot of courts around, people playing basketball in the city, and you have a lot of the city scenes in all these areas. Beautiful.
As we move forward, one thing I noticed when I was handed the 14-24-2.8, the Zenith Core for the very first time, it looks big, right? But the weight and the balance, what did you feel? I need to know, when Alfredo handed you the lens, you went to go put it on. Did you have that like moment of shock? Oh my God, I can't believe how light this is.
It's like, I don't know if it looks, it looks big in the sense that you're thinking, okay, fine, you're told you're going to have a 24 to 200. It looks big. You put it on and everything is very, very light indeed. And that's the thing, you get used to using a very light camera. And then when you come back to using your old camera, it's like everything is now heavy and you're like, I want to get back into that again. So yeah, everything is very light about this system. And that definitely is the bonus here. You don't want a system that you're sort of, can give you all sorts of carpal tunnel issues.
Weigh you down at the end of 60,000 steps a day, I know.
Right.
Certainly.
Right, exactly.
What do you got going here? Why the crop? Why the control? Talk about this picture. This is one of your selects. What's going on here?
All right, so one of the things that I was really going for over here was emotion, and as I said, we wanted some sort of impact from it. I'm a big believer that when you put the eyes in any photograph, the eyes are like a magnet. They draw the viewer to the face. And if you're looking for a shot if you're looking for a scene where you're looking for something else, you want to sort of crop out the eyes. In this particular shot here, it was really important that I wanted the viewer to see the layup with the player off the ground, because obviously you can see them suspended. And having the eyes in there would definitely take your attention away from that. Another thing, again, that's also very big for me is the expression of what the mouth is doing and what the limbs are doing. I believe that not just having the eyes, but also the mouth and the limbs tell you another story entirely. And just seeing, this moment being so decisive as it is, tells you another story of what's actually happening in this scene. And then the backdrop of the city, you have a city basketball player sort of doing their thing in a city that is all about, people sort of expressing themselves in the city. We don't have like playgrounds like most places in the suburbs where kids would be playing. Everything is done in the city. And so in this particular shot, I'm really trying to tell that story of, this is the city we live in. This is how we sort of express ourselves. This is how we have fun. And we do it in the midst of the corporate environment, as you can see in the background. So that's what this is all about. This is also great because I think this is where I use the 24 to 200 for this. And I believe this was shot at 51 millimeters. So I was trying to do something slightly different from what I would normally do, because I don't normally shoot at this focal length, and just really telling a different, story. And I do like the fact that, it was caught in the moment that it was.
Beautiful action. And thank you for giving us the background on that, because it's really interesting. And I love the way your mind thinks. And so again, thank you for sharing that. There's so many reasons why I love this picture. I mean, I love them all, but just a little bit of everything going on here. So talk about this. What are you shooting with? How are you doing this?
So this is going back to the ultra wide, the 14 to 24. Here I'm also just trying to, use layers. Now tell another story using layers. You have this, the basketball player from the previous shot, the same person doing a layup. And I just thought it was quite interesting having, the reflection of someone who's there just sitting there observing, maybe just taking a rest. And just really, again, just using the focal length the best way I could to tell this story. It's really, again, just putting, the city in there, the layup, and then the restful thing. So you have like 3 different elements in this particular shot here.
Totally a testament to, as you say, most people would take that pedestrian point of view, which is standing up and not, getting down or getting lower. And I think most of the impact in these pictures is the fact that you're almost down on the ground, either laying on your belly, as you said, using the flip screen, so you can get the camera in a position that you couldn't physically be in, just laying it on the floor and still making it work. I just really, really enjoy this. Again, the light, the color, some of the beautiful images that are about to come. let's talk about these as we start to work our way out of this talk. But some really, really great stuff and great moments coming up. And where are we now, and what's going on here?
All right, so this is in Dumbo. Dumbo has some really nice brickwork, and also gives obviously some very, very interesting light as well during the day. And what I love so much about working in Dumbo is some of the characters you meet, you get to see over there. So everything in this shot just happens to be orange. And, as you mentioned, you have such a great dynamic range. You could almost see the eyes in the shadow as you look deeply into the shot. And I love that because, there is a certain mystery. I mean, most of the times you don't want to see any detail whatsoever. You want to see anything in there. You want it to be completely black. But having that much detail in there is something that I absolutely love, because then it also gives you a peek into what this person is doing and what they're about. And just being able to get close enough to get a portrait of someone doing their thing in this scene is essentially what this is about. Just getting really good light, really good color, and really good tones at the same time.
It's beautiful. When we talk about color and tones, do you go to any particular white balance setting or color mode when you're shooting?
Generally, I like to shoot with a cloudy white balance when I shoot, especially when I'm shooting outdoors, because I just like the way it looks when I'm previewing my images. I obviously change that whenever I'm working, but I want the images to look very warm. So I tend to sort of set my white balance to that, either that or auto. If I'm indoors, it's generally auto. Say, for instance, now we have a place, like in some of the images you'll see, the white balance was set to automatic. But generally on the street, I would have that on cloudy.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. More mirrors, more reflections. I absolutely love this. So as you move on in this assignment, where are we now?
This is the same place, same Dumbo. In fact, the character from the previous shot is the character in the mirror here. I very inspired by Alex Webb, and he has a shot very similar, which pretty much inspires this shot with the mirror. In fact, not just Alex Webb. I think even Steve McCurry is another one of my inspirations. Has played around with mirrors and mirrors of people sort of walking around with mirrors, and so you have someone walking with a mirror. But I think one of the things that really, really I love here there are three things that really catch my attention. You have the color of the person in the mirror reflected. You have the fact that this person's carrying a mirror. You have the dog who's just kind of walking by, minding their own business, doing their thing. But I think also you have the pants of the lady who's carrying the mirror and those shoes, right, with the leopard skin. So there's like so many different bits of color, so many different bits of culture, so many different bits of different things all mixed together, different characters, different elements in this particular scene that you generally will only see in a place like New York City. And that's what this is about. It's the amount of diversity of characters expressing themselves in different ways. So having an image that kind of gives that sort of triangle or triad of things is what this is about.
Mm-hmm. Just as a side note for people out there, and I'm curious, sometimes you're going to be working with people on the street that you know. What happens when you don't know people on the street? Do they tend to be open to you taking pictures? Do you ask them? How do you communicate with them, or do you not sometimes? How do you approach people you don't know?
It depends on what I'm doing. I generally think most people, whenever they go on the street, or most people who want to shoot street photography, first of all, show a lot of fear. And I always, whenever I'm sort of teaching street photography with students, I always tell them that first of all, you attract who you are. Don't feel too scared. Just really, it's all about how you're presented. If you're going in looking very weird and sort of going in, taking lots of photographs in a very sort of weird manner, most people are going to get really
aggressive,
scared.
right?
Yeah. But if you're going in with a really nice smile on your face and just really with a sense of joy and happiness, most people will approach you the same way. So generally, whenever I'm taking photos, especially in New York, where people are not the most sort of I don't want to say people are not the friendliest, because I've actually met some of the nicest people here in New York.
I think I would say guarded is a good word.
Okay, yeah, guarded, I think, is the word. Yeah, that's a very, very good word. But I think people are guarded because, first of all, they don't know who you are, and they don't know what you're doing. If you sort of lift your guard and sort of give them the impression that you are actually a happy, friendly person, most people will be friendly to you. And generally for me, what I tend to do most of the times is whenever I get a scene of something that looks interesting, I would sort of, first of all, take a photograph, and then I smile at the person. Sometimes they come up to me and say, "Did you get a good picture?" And I go, well, "Yeah, it was actually really cool." And I show them the photograph, and they're like, "Oh, cool. Do you know what? We could do another one." And you start having really cool conversations with them. My own style of street photography involves a lot of interaction with people, particularly around places like basketball courts or in places where things are happening. People sometimes, when they see you, they expect you to take photos. I sometimes I take a backpack with me, and I have a I Heart New York T-shirt or I Heart NY T-shirt, so I look like a tourist. And people generally tend to see you as that. They think, okay, fine, he's probably just someone from some country somewhere, trying to take some nice scenes. I'm gonna try and present the best of myself, as it were.
Very cool. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Same pants,
Yeah.
beautiful shadows, really nice approach here. Talk about this image as we move forward.
So I don't know if, you're a New Yorker as well. So you grew up with a lot of this on the street. Hopscotch is a thing that everybody tends to connect with, especially because it brings them back to their childhood. You see some kids have sort of scribbled or drawn the hopscotch map on the pavement. Everyone who walks by it always does the jump. And so when you see this sort of thing, you're thinking, I'm sure something interesting is going to happen over here. So this particular character is actually doing that same thing here as well. And I hung out in this area for a bit, because you're going to meet all sorts of people. You're going to end up talking to them. And the first thing that caught my attention was I saw the shadows, and I thought, just to kind of make it less contrived, take the head out of the shot, or rather take the elements that are so obviously you're going to photograph, and photograph the things that are very sort of abstract. So like the shadow jumping on top of the numbers as well is definitely something that will sort of will make the shot a lot more interesting. And that's what this is about. It's really about a city where everybody connects on a game that they all grew up with. You could be going to work, and you're coming back from work, and you see that, and you're like, oh, I'm going to have a bit of a play as I walk on my way.
Excellent. So as the assignment's going on, you getting more and more comfortable with the camera? Easy peasy?
Oh, definitely. A lot more comfortable, and therefore I'm able to even get pictures like this where you're able to get close, and you're like, hey, you say to this person, like, hey, can I try something different? And I love the fact that people are doing these things and coming to these things. And as I said, more people are jumping on the map itself. And the focus is, again, phenomenal. Just nailing it just one time. Because one of the challenges whenever you're taking a picture like this is you could end up focusing on the wrong thing, which could be on the face, and you want to get something in the background instead. But just kind of tapping on that area that you're looking for, and the camera being clever enough to actually get that is also pretty phenomenal. So that's what this is about.
Is there any point in time where you're using the viewfinder? Mainly, I guess, for this shoot, you're working with the touch screen at all? Talk about your experiences when you look through the viewfinder.
The viewfinder itself is the same. I mean, it's one of the things I think I love about this particular viewfinder is the pixel depth. It does not look like you're looking at a digital image. It's definitely, it's obviously a digital image where you start playing around with your exposure, because obviously as you change the exposure, you start to see the effects of the settings that you have, and that for me is another great thing. But it doesn't give you don't get a sense that you're looking at something that is that is very, very digital. You're looking at something that is so rich in detail. But at the same time, you're seeing, it's almost like you're looking into a different world. You're looking through some sunglasses sometimes when you're playing with the exposure. So I really enjoyed working with that. I actually think in this particular scene, I correct myself on this, I did actually use a viewfinder for this particular shot because obviously it's at eye level. And I was able to nail the exposure that I wanted instantly. So there wasn't any sort of guessing around or having to sort of get one exposure and then have a look, because by that time you've already lost the particular image. You just get it instantly at that point.
Right. You know, I often feel too when Z first came out and, you know, looked at what the engineers were doing, as much attention as they put into the mount and optical image quality, like pristine image quality there's actually a lens built into this viewfinder. So the attention to detail, color accuracy, you know, these are all things, again, you don't see on a spec sheet, but it's all there. There are actually lens elements within this viewfinder. And it's just, to me, it's so much easier. Just look through the camera, never take my eye away from the camera. Not shooting again the way you shoot on the streets, and to be able to control my menus and all that kind of stuff. It's just that it's so important to have that. And you were talking about being somewhat indoors. I guess, is this a shot you were talking about, or in the subway? Yeah,
exactly. And I think one of the things I love here is the fact that I was trying to, it's the train moving in the background has, you know, obviously has a blur in there, and that is also quite deliberate. I wanted to sort of see how I could play around with those elements. This is obviously shot at quite high ISO of, I think, 2500. The aperture is actually very high, which is at 16. And the shutter is at, this is 1/25 because I'm trying to catch that motion. But I don't know if there's anything inbuilt in the camera, any image stabilization of sorts, but this was, I was able to sort of get it really steady. But more so, the color tone here is quite phenomenal. Again, huge dynamic range indoors. I remember when I pulled this out, at 2500 ISO, you can't see any noise whatsoever. It's just so beautiful. But skin tones, again, huge for me. I remember trying to do some post-production in this image, and I said to Alfredo, I was like, I don't feel like I need to do any post-production whatsoever, because everything looks exactly as I would like it to be. The colors are just great.
No, it's beautiful. And to address what you mentioned before, adopting a 5-stop VR from the original Z system, plus one of those technical facts everybody wants to know, if you have a lens with VR as well, they work in tandem. So I've had photographers, I had spoken to, you know, many photographers have used like combinations of the 7200 Z Nikkor with a 2x converter now at, you know, 1,000 millimeter focal length and shooting at a 60th of a second. And that's just it's mind boggling. But that is a lot of, you know, what's built into the Z7 II, Z6 II, as well as the other Z series cameras, the Z6 and Z7.
Right.
Mirrors again. I love your mirrors. And certainly the precision in which you're, you know, positioning yourself to make this image come together. Talk about this.
Right. So again, this is just using, you know, that advanced superior autofocus. I think I waited behind this person some time trying to get a shot of people walking by, just to kind of give it an element while the train's in the background. And again, just really being so precise in getting, you know, the actual person in the shot is something that's also quite cool. You know, this is something, again, you know, everyone does here in New York, is that you see this scene where people are sort of, you know, doing their makeup at the same time while they are sort of waiting for a train, and things are just happening. Everyone just does their own thing. This particular shot just came as a result of that. And again, you can see some really interesting color. You've got some reds, some blues, and some yellow. And that's what this is about, just kind of playing around with color and playing around with different, you know, tones in that.
Beautiful. Thank you for taking us on this journey. It's pretty incredible. And again, all kidding aside, seriously, you know, to be able to have just a short amount of time to get the assignment done, do you feel at the end of the day you got what you wanted?
I definitely got more than what I wanted. I would love to play around more and just kind of keep, you know, because it's different. This introduces a different approach to how I shoot on the streets. I got everything that I needed for the assignment. But now I'm I'm itching to travel now. I'm itching to go abroad and sort of try different things that I'm used to trying, that I'm used to getting whenever I'm in different parts of the world with this particular system. So this is something I'm very much looking forward to. Beautiful.
Well, thank you, Jide, for giving us some insight on your journey, the performance of the camera, certainly your street photography techniques. Learned a little bit of everything here, and it's always a pleasure to talk to you. And certainly, I think a lot of people out there are kind of hungry to be back out there shooting the way we used to shoot, and now maybe under different circumstances, but just being creative. I think there are times when I don't shoot, the creative in me just starts to boil up, and I start to get real agitated and frustrated. And I've talked to many photographers about that you got to get out there and create. So nice to be able to do something essentially in your backyard, and the work obviously just outstanding. So thank you for everything you've done.
Thanks a lot, Mike. I really appreciate that. Yeah.
And thank you for getting up this morning to talk to me as we continue on with this series on assignment. Those of you tuning in, we certainly appreciate you doing that. We hope we've answered a bunch of questions that you may have had. Jide talking about the transition from DSLR to mirrorless a little bit, talking about color, talking about focus, and certainly talking about street photography. We've got more assignments and on-assignment segments for the Creators Hour. So please check out NikonUSA.com and check out the Creators Hour site, and you will see the detailed schedule of who's to come and other people that have used the Nikon Z7 II or the Z6 II, or however you want to say it, Z6 II, Z7 II, and get some real world experience from people who have actually used the camera. So thank you guys for tuning in. For Nikon, I'm Mike Corrado. Jide, again, thank you. Everybody out there, be safe, take some great pictures, and please share them with the world, share them with us. We'll see you soon.
Brilliant. Take care.